Hello everyone, it's Warwick White here, your altruistic sanctimonious friend here. So I'm going to talk about new truths. As you know, I have this philosophy which I repeat a lot in my posts about how a person's beliefs and nature go hand in hand, and how the beliefs of the collective generate the kind of reality or the nature of the world we live in. Today I'm going to give some talks about the latter half of the philosophy, about how the beliefs of the collective create the type of world we live in. And on this note, I'm going to talk about things which have become the truth in our modern day society, which weren't true before. So this post is about kind of what I refer to as migrating truths. Okay, I'm going to start out with political correctness. I'm not the biggest fan of political correctness, though sometimes I think it's used in a relatively positive way. My real problem with political correctness is that it kind of works in tandem with kind of the I don't know psychology of manipulation. Very often with positive association, they tell the conscious mind something while sending a kind of a subtle subversive message, given the opposite kind of message. I'm trying to explain what I mean by this. If we take the political correct term that was recent to do with refuse sacks, as you know, you're not supposed to use the term black bag anymore because it's supposed to be offensive to black people. Now, on the surface, this may seem like positive association. Now, with positive association, that's important to understand is when you use positive association in this context, you're telling the conscious mind that you mustn't associate, say, black people with refuse or rubbish, for example. But at the same time, on a subversive, almost unconscious level, you're also teaching a person that there's an association between black people and refuse. And the thing with this type of manipulation, why I think it's unhealthy, is because it's wiring up people's minds to make conscious associations which didn't exist before. So, for example, this is an example of a migrating truth. If you go back to the days before political correctness existed, as a generalistic term, pretty much no one made any association between refuse and black people. As a matter of fact, refuse was probably a kind of a racist term against white people. I don't remember you guys remember that term white trash, which is supposed to be like a racist term towards white people. And the thing is, I used to use the term black bag before the political correctness came out. And what's important to understand is that association is in the mind of the individual. If a black person is offended by someone using the term black bag in the context of refuse sacks, what that black person has to understand is that association is in the mind of an individual. It's in the black person's mind. It's not necessarily that association or connection doesn't necessarily exist in the person which is using the term black bag, if that makes sense. So what happened is this is how the truth has migrated. Like black bag now has become like the new N word, and basically it's creating a new truth in society. Before political correctness, there was no association between black bags and black people, or refuse sacks and black people. This truth did not exist. But what's happening now is this is evolving into a truth. It's becoming a new truth. So it starts out with a positive association, and then on an unconscious level, you're making this association between refuse and black people. And eventually, over a period of time, the association between black people and refuse starts to float to the conscious mind and then becomes a conscious belief and becomes the new N word. And this is what I'm talking about this is what I don't like about political correctness, is that I believe that society or the keyholders of society are a lot more corrupt than we probably realise they are. Because when the keyholders of society enforce this, they're creating new truth. Like, for example, if someone uses this term black bag in in a work environment, they can end up getting sacked and losing their job. So this is actually enforced on a legal level. So the government is using the illusion that they're doing something for a good reason, but in actual fact they're doing it for a bad reason. They're taking a very teeny tiny, almost minuscule group of people that's made this association between black bags and refuse, which didn't exist before, and they've created this as they've created this a whole new truth. And this is kind of really, really a bad thing, because political correctness is getting a bit out of hand now, to the point where people make this weird association in their head that hardly anyone makes this association. They get offended by it. They bring it to the forefront. the key holders of society that are corrupt realise, actually, this is a good way to wire people up to make it easier to control. So yeah, we'll make this politically correct now. And this is really what you're not really kind of realising. I'm going to talk about a few truths that go back from times that we can remember in the here and now, how truths are changing, and go back slowly back in time as to see how things have changed with the truth. Because there's a few truths which are being promoted at the moment, which I don't really like. I think it's very, very bad. So I'm going to go back to another thing, which is people are normalising. For example, at the moment, people that are unemployed, a lot of people talking about making unemployed people work for their kind of their dole money or their state benefit, as it were. And the thing to remember with state benefit is that it's just barely enough to live, not a penny more, with no expendable income whatsoever. Now, people are talking about this as, people should be made to work for their state benefit. And they make it sound like it's normal, because sometimes they say things that make it normal and don't realise what we're making normal over a period of time. Now, if you really think about it, let's go back into history, pre-abolition in the 1860s, before the black slaves were supposedly free. Now, slaves, those black guys in the cotton field that were slaves, picking cotton, they actually had some expendable income, believe it or not much, but they had expendable income. Now, this thing with making people work for their state benefit, this is actually worse than slavery. And people are talking about it as if it's normal. And the reason why the key holders of society, they're very, very corrupt in that they'll spread this ideology, which is convenient to themselves, and they'll spread it to really make people believe that oh yeah, take pride in what you do, take pride in earning your keep and that kind of stuff. But you have to understand that this is a very, very bad belief, because if a person takes on the belief that they should work with no expendable income whatsoever, they have to understand that they're actually normalising slavery there. And everyone that works has the right to expendable income. If someone chooses to have children, well, then their children, their wife, obviously will exhaust all of that expendable income. But if a person's single, don't have wife, they should have expendable income. Anyone that works for a living should have that. It's wrong. And the people that promote these ideas, or the people that are pushing them, are the corrupt key holders of society, which is kind of quite bad. I'm going to talk about another truth which has changed over the years. This one, I'm gonna digress a little bit, because this has been quite concerning to me over the years, and I think it really, really should change. I spoke about this briefly in one of my previous posts, but I want to touch on it a bit more because it's very, very concerning. A long time ago, if back in the 70s, if some retired old git that's well known in the community was sitting on a park bench feeding the pigeons and watching the children play, back in the days, no one would think anything of that. If that happened now, a guy would probably get lynched and someone would beat the crap out of them, because they would be very suspicious or worried about any sinister kind of intentions toward youngsters. And also, if a man back in the 70s was chatting someone up in a bar and they said they love kids, that would be like a nice little pickup line. If a man says that now, it creeps people out a bit. And I will tell you the reason why I have a problem with this. This is because if I was to make an example here, say for example, I'll use racism as an example. Let's say you get a black person. Some people might be racist towards black people. And you get a black person could be someone like, he could be a scientist, could be a doctor, could be someone like Martin Luther King, or it could be something stereotype like what racist people associate black people, like someone who's a thief or rapist or whatever. Now what happens is, when you create a unique association in a person's mind rather than the common association. So for example, if you convince a person that this black person, he's not a scientist, he's not a doctor, he's not like Martin Luther King, and he can only be like someone who steals or rapes or whatever. Once an association, if you think of these four things as things which are common to black people, but none of these things are unique. But when you kind of do that, and again, it's one thing which is unique to black people in a person's mind, that's what makes a person racist, basically. And the thing here that I was concerned about the reason why I use this example, is that when you make an association unique rather than common in a person's unconscious mind, that becomes a trigger, and it can trigger violence. So people that say are violent towards black people, to them, in their mind, black people are all like thieves or rapists, for example, and they're not the other three things. They're not like a scientist or a doctor or Martin Luther King, someone that's won the Nobel Peace Prize. And the reason why I'm comparing this type of prejudice to what's happened with people and child protection at the moment is that if a person shows any like paternal instincts towards children, a person who say they love children, a person might show attention to children, they might be lonely, they might be broody, they, I don't know, might just be contemplating their own childhood. And of course, don't get me wrong, I don't rule it out. Yeah, a person could actually be a sexual predator. But the point is, all these things that I named, these are common things. And what's happening is now youngsters or people in their, let's say, adolescence, let's say, for example, adolescents are having their heads wired up in a way that they're making a unique association between, say, a man that admits that they love children with, say, someone that's into sexual misconduct or towards children, for example. People's heads are being wired up like this because I've noticed that basically in the 70s, this wasn't the truth. In the 70s, no one thought anything of it if some old retired git was feeding the pigeons and enjoying watching the kids play. And because what happens is, don't get me wrong, in the 70s, if it was someone that wasn't known in the community doing that, it would probably raise eyebrows a bit. But what's happening is, it's very, very important to understand is that it's very important to understand that if some retired old git is watching kids in the park play, okay, yeah, of course, one of the possibilities that person could be a sexual predator, but it might be contemplating his own childhood. He might just have paternal instincts, love children, might be lonely, might be broody. Person may not have gone through his life and not had children, so it could be lots of things. And these are all common things of possibilities. But as soon as you make a unique association, think, well, that can only mean one thing. As soon as you do that, you make a trigger in a person's unconscious mind, and that trigger, believe it or not, that unique association can create a person to be more likely to grow up with tendencies towards sexual misconduct towards children, or violent triggers towards a person that shows paternal instincts towards children that aren't their own. And I'll explain why this works, because what happens is it's normally enforced with fear or shame. If someone actually says they love children, or they show any attention towards children whatsoever that aren't their own, it really, really triggers things in people. And what they're not really understanding is, if I was going to go into the classic Psych 101, every animal and mammal and arachnid and animal and the whole animal kingdom has fraternal instincts. Like the instinct to nurture is hardwired into everyone's DNA, and to have fraternal instincts is to love children. So what happens is, if you make a unique association in someone's mind, say someone shows love or admits love towards children that aren't their own, if you make a unique association between that and paedophilia, then what's happening is you're training the person's unconscious mind to make them believe that in a way they're a paedophile. Because if a person believes that showing love towards children can only mean one thing, that combined with the fact that everyone has love for children, i.e. fraternal instincts, means you're telling the unconscious mind, oh, you must be a paedophile then. Unconsciously, this is what happened in the mind. And this is happening to children, at the adolescence phase. And I think when a person, I think the child safety kind of activities going on at the moment are very, very positive things, and I encourage them. And I think, they're very, very good that they do this. And I'm not actually against these things with child protection, but I'm against allowing youngsters to create a unique association in their unconscious minds between paternal instincts, not so much fraternal, but paternal instincts, and paedophilia. This is very, very unhealthy association. And I've noticed also it happens at the same age that children are starting to get kind of groomed into like drug gangs and gangsters and that, and child drug muling. And I notice it's caused the politics of kind of crime to kind of get mixed, in the sense that, a long time ago, back in the 70s, paedophile rings and criminal rings were kind of separate. Obviously, they won't really separate at the highest levels, but what's happening now at the lower level of crimes, paedophilia, like paedophile rings and criminal rings are becoming associated. This is kind of becoming a new truth of our society. This truth didn't exist before. A lot of people that might be watching this post might be a bit creeped out by what I'm saying, and you might be creeped out if you're not my age. I'm actually 50 years old, so I'm old enough to remember the 70s. So if you're not old enough to remember the 70s, you might think I'm talking a load of rubbish. But if you're old enough to actually see what I've seen and actually see the truth change from the 70s to a new truth now, the new truth now is based on how people have changed their beliefs. Back in the 70s, people believed that if someone was showing paternal instincts towards children that not their own, then there could be all manner of things. And I'm not ruling out the possibility of sexual misconduct or intentions towards sexual misconduct. That's just one of them. But again, it could be broody, could be lonely, could have just strong paternal instincts, could be a lot of things. And back then, people took all of those things into consideration. And back then, the old stranger danger thing was still enforced towards children the same way it is today. But as the truth has changed now, people make a unique association with these things, and this is very, very, very bad. And that's why I want to touch on it and kind of explain that this is a very, very bad truth. And I think what I'd like to do is spread a new truth and make a new suggestions to people, because one of the things that the corrupt keyhole society get up to is that very often they'll look at things which make people feel safer. Basically, they look for things, if they want to be corrupt, and the corrupt keyholder societies, because I blame the keyholder society for this new corruption, this new truth. And that is that from a psychological point of view, the keyholder society know the psychological effects of allowing this new truth to become the truth. They know that it will cause more paedophiles, not less. They actually know that. They don't think it, they know it. And their neglect to address it is a form of corruption. And what I'd like to do is to suggest a new truth, because what the corrupt keyholder society do, they look at things which meet two conditions. One, does it make you feel safer? Two, does it actually make your children less safe? Because sometimes things that make you feel safe can actually make you less safe. So the keyholder society look for things which make us feel safe, which make us less safe, and then enforce that. So that way, people in society think the government's helping them when actually they're not. So I'm going to suggest a new truth that we should all believe, that we should be practiced, that actually will keep our children safe. And that is, first and foremost, don't allow adolescent children to make a unique association between paternal instincts and paedophilia. Don't ever let them do that, because otherwise they'll either grow up to have paedophile tendencies themselves, or violent tendencies towards men that show paternal instincts toward children aren't their own. Very often both. So again, like I say, don't allow a child to make that unique association. Also, something that will really, really keep your children safer is, as you know, we enforce the stranger danger philosophy on our children. This isn't enough. As well as enforcing stranger danger on children, you also need to invoke a deep sense of confidence in the child that they can come to you, the parent, if something like this happens. But not just that, this should also be taught in schools. Like in schools, they should also be taught that they should be taught stranger danger, but the teachers should also invoke a sense of deep confidence in the children that they can come to not just the parents, but the teachers about things that have perhaps happened, which could be where some adult has shown inappropriate behaviour towards a child. This is very, very good things to do. And so basically they should teach this in schools. They should, in schools and at home, don't allow children to make a unique association. And make sure you teach them what constitutes inappropriate behaviour. But in doing so, make sure they don't make a unique association, that dangerous unique association. And also, the thing you have to understand with criminals, with paedophiles, is that they have certain things in common with common criminals, and that is they like to get away with things. Just as a burglar would case the joint before they burgle it, a paedophile or someone wants to groom a child for sexual misconduct would actually case the child out. If a child has a deep sense of confidence that they can go to their parents about things, a potential paedophile would catch on to that, and they would say, "Oh, this is too risky," and that will keep your child safe. So basically, if it's in the education system, it's very open out front with children. Children are taught both by their parents and at school what constitutes sexual misconduct. Because very often in paedophile rings, when someone's interfered with, that child thinks it's normal behavior, which is why they don't say anything. So in the schools need to teach to the child's conscious mind what constitutes inappropriate behavior, what constitutes sexual misconduct, and in doing so, invoke a deep, deep sense of confidence in that child that they can go to the teachers, they can go to the headmasters, they can go to the parents, they can go to the police. And if that is invoked in a child, that will keep our children safe. Whereas if the things that we're teaching children at the moment is we're teaching them to make a unique, exclusive association between paternal instincts and sexual misconduct, that has to stop. So anyway, I digressed a bit there. I kind of hope you understand what I'm saying with that. But anyway, I'm going to go on to some other truths which have kind of changed over the past, and this is going back to also making you guys aware of just how corrupt our government actually is. They're a lot more corrupt than you think. Like, for example, as most people know, the group, there's an old group in the 70s called skinheads. So I used to be one, so probably still one now, no hair. And they became, originally, skinheads were a very, very anti-racist group. They were, the shaving of the heads was symbolic of lack of identity. And what happened is, I'm kind of old enough to remember, just barely old enough to remember when skinheads actually became a racist group. In actual fact, they never were a racist group. Now, one of the biggest threats to society is lack of identity. Because you need identity for identity politics work to manipulate people. I said in one of my philosophies in a previous post that without identity, there can be no prejudice and there can be no war. And this is why it's a very big kind of threat to the keyhole to society. The society did not like the skinhead movement because they believed that their fundamental philosophy or ideology was based on lack of identity. What happened is this was such an extreme threat to the keyholders of society that they kept on posting things on the news of people with like shaved heads committing acts of violence towards black people, and they would not stop this on the news until people made a conscious connection between skinheads and racism. Now, I'm not a skinhead, I just do this because it's comfortable. But the thing is, here it's very important to understand that this is another thing where keyhole society are very, very corrupt. Now, very often when truths change, I mean, one of the things that the skinheads did, which was wrong, is that they violated a rule which I call, there's this rule in amongst Muslims in the world of Islam. They say never associate anything with God. Now, lack of identity is something which is very, very good and positive. So if you think anything that's good and positive is God, so by shaving their heads, they're associating something with God, basically. And what happens is, the reason why the people in the media and the news and the corrupt government were able to manipulate the media and get people to believe that skinheads were racist and bad people is because they associated something with God. By shaving their heads, everyone knew that people with shaved heads believed in lack of identity. But by doing that, they're associating identity with lack of identity, if that makes sense. So like the shaving of the head is something physical which people could see, which was associated with lack of identity. So the point I'm saying here is if the skinhead movement or the lack of identity movement didn't all go, if the people that followed it, they all didn't go around shaving their heads, then the media would have had a very hard time slandering them and making them out to be a bad group of people, because if there's nothing associated with the movement like a shaved head or some kind of clothes or beard or whatever, then there's no anchor for that to happen. So this is kind of what happens. This is one of the reasons why I always teach people don't associate anything with God. Now, understand when I use the word God, I'm not religious. I don't believe in religion. I just believe in the creator, basically. My definition of good and evil is just social and antisocial behavior. That's all what good and bad is. So basically, if you associate something with good, then evil people have what you could call an anchor to reassociate their bad things. It's like, for example, in Northern Ireland, when things get really, really peaceful, Someone gets someone to dress up in the Roman Catholic colours green and go do something bad in a Protestant precinct, and then the trouble starts again, and it gets peaceful again, and then the key holders of society pay someone to wear orange, which is the colour of the Protestants, go do something in a Roman Catholic community, and then war starts again. Because with the green and the orange in Northern Ireland, they've associated these two colours with God, as it were. Or, if I wanted to play devil's advocate and I wanted to give Muslims a hard time and give them a bad name, I would just get myself a little Abraham Lincoln style beard and maybe wear a Sunni cap, say my name's Hassan, go do something bad, and all the good Muslims will get a bad name, if that makes sense. This is why you shouldn't associate anything with God. And of course, skinheads associated by shaving their heads, they're associating something with God. They're giving them an anchor, if that makes sense. And this is one of the things with skinheads and lack of identity. So this is an old truth, where the old truth was skinheads were good. The new truth, the government used their corruption and their manipulation techniques to use the bald head as an anchor to give people the idea and change the truth. I mean, even to this day, with people that, they've got white skin and skinheads, a lot of black people would be a bit wary and think they might be racist. They've got blue eyes and a skinhead, that kind of stuff. So this is something to be kind of aware of. This is a truth. Because people that, again, aren't my age, a lot younger than me, they'll probably think it is a racist thing. And then people my age know that it originally wasn't. So this is a truth which is migrated, as you can see. Or another thing, you're going into a friend of mine that used to do a degree in sociology, and I asked her to do. I suggested that she do get some statistics on mixed race people. Now, also that's another truth, was the word mixed race. Going back to political correctness, before political correctness existed, the term half caste was classed as a polite term, and it wasn't racist. It became racist because of political correctness, but in the old days it was always used in a polite term. Half caste was not a racist term, and it's a racist term now. That's just another example. I digress. But anyway, I asked this person to do a prison criminal thing kind of study, because when she was kind of at university, she was studying sociology. Obviously, when you get your degree, you have to do something to show your skills. And she did some statistics. She did some statistics on all mixed race people that were born between 1960 and 1980, and the different types of mixed race people, depending on where they are. Like some half Asian, half white, half Asian, half Jamaican, half white, and couple of different mixes, about 4 mixes she did. And she did a survey to see how many people born in 1960 and 1980 mixed race people actually been to prison. And it turns out that the highest one was the ones that were half English and half Jamaican. The amount of them that had gone to prison that born between those years was ridiculously high. It's like 84% of them have all been to prison. And I think half Indian or like half Asian, half white people was something like 34%. And I can't remember what it is, but a black person is something like 4 times more likely to go to prison than a white person. And a mixed race person is over 20 times more likely to go to prison than even a black person. And you might say, why am I saying this? Well, the thing is, because of the corrupt key holders of society, is that lack of identity is one of the biggest threats to the key holders of society. And mixed race people they lack identity, so this makes them hard to control. So, of course, I'm digressing here a bit, so forgive me, but basically the general rules of control is that when people have no identity or they're truly individual, it will overwhelm the corrupt key holder society. It will overwhelm the resources. They won't be able to control them all. So if you kind of get, 7 or 8, maybe even 20 groups of people that all identify with an ideology or some kind of group, basically the key holder society just need to put someone, make an idol or a person which is a major authority in each group. So that way, for the key holder society to control everyone, they just need to control the leaders, and the leaders and the people that the leaders represent each group. That group tends to follow those leaders, if that makes sense. So the problem with individuality and lack of identity is controlling people is almost impossible because they just don't have the resources for it. So, and this is something where this is kind of, I'm not really totally digressing here from the subject of new truths, because I'm sure if we went back in time long enough, maybe to the Stone Age, back then identities probably didn't exist, or maybe they did exist, but maybe nepotism is being a part of human nature for a long time. But there have been movements of people to have lack of identity, and the keyhole to society have always slandered them in whatever way possible. So another truth, which is obviously true now, is that almost everyone has identity. A new truth was the current truth is that people say you should be proud of what you are, and be patriotic and all that kind of stuff. This is the truth at the moment. This is the truth that I'm challenging. Anyway, I'm going to go kind of a bit. So as we talked about skinheads, but I want to kind of just summarize here what I was talking about, how truths migrate and how they become new things. And there's lots of other examples we could go back to. It's like another racist term, wog. You've heard the term wog is a racist term. Go back long enough in time, it was a polite term for someone that immigrated from the West Indies, I think after World War II. They had WOG printed on a passport, stood for West Indian Overseas Gentleman, WOG, and then later on, I don't know, late 70s, WOG became a racist term. So they keep on, with political correctness, they keep on changing things. People take things which weren't racist terms and then making them into racist terms. Like, mixed race wasn't racist, it is now. Black bag wasn't racist, it is now. And obviously people that had paternal instincts, men that had paternal instincts towards children that weren't their own, weren't labelled as paedophiles. They are now. And the thing is, the truths have changed over time. And the whole purpose of this post is that any time new beliefs are pushed onto us, you need to examine those truths, and you have to ask yourself, if we all believe this, will this make the world a better place? And if it doesn't, then you need to reject them. Basically, this is what this post is all about, is that my favourite philosophy, as you know, is divided into two halves. The first half of the philosophy is person's beliefs and a person's nature go hand in hand as to a person's nature and their will. The other half of the philosophy is about not the individual but society. And then it goes on to say, but most importantly, the beliefs, nature and will of the collective, everyone, generates the very reality in which we all live. Only correct beliefs can set us free. So this post is about the second half of my philosophy, and about not allowing the keyhole to society and to trick the masses into collectively taking on wrong beliefs, which is actually detrimental to society, because the keyhole to society are much more corrupt than you think they are. They're much more sick and twisted than you think they are. Anytime a truth can be, anytime a good truth or a good ideology, a political ideology, a personal ideology comes up, the first thing the keyhole society do, they'll try to slander the people that follow it, or they'll try to redefine the ideology. It's like socialism, for example. A lot of the corrupt keyhole society are trying to they tried slandering the people that followed it, but it didn't work, so they tried to redefine it to mean something else. The same happened with communism. Communism is a path to a class of stateless, moneyless society, and of course they redefined it and said, no, communism is what happened in the Soviet Union, and so they slander the people. Or if individuals spread good ideology, then the individual is slandered, for example. And another thing, also another truth which I would like to promote at the end of this post is, say what you will about about all these examples that I've given, but we must, as a people, question every new belief which just comes away, because they're normalizing modern slavery by trying to make people work for a living with absolutely no expendable income whatsoever. And we shouldn't normalize that. We should reject that, because that is slavery. Not all political correctness is bad, but when someone comes out of a ridiculous association which no one made, a connection which no one made, we need to fight it. Because the black bag business, no one made the connection between refuse and black people when they said the word black bag. No one did. That was just an association in the mind of some deranged individual. That's all it was. And then the law actually enforced it, and they forced it to be true. And and people get sacked for using that term now, sacked the blacks. But anyway, but we're coming from, this is really, really bad. And also even things like lack of identity. But anyway, I know I'm kind of mumbling a bit, but I think you kind of get where I'm coming from. Truths migrate, and try. I hope you kind of really comprehend and really think about what I'm saying. And every time a truth comes out, really stop and think about it, and remember that the truth is relative. What's right and wrong can actually be relative, And another thing I would like to encourage people to do to help make the world a better place is for everyone. I know this is hard, because things like being proud of your identity, proud of what you are, and being patriotic, this has been normalized for even as long as I can remember. I can't remember when that wasn't true, but I think we need to question that, and we need to make it not true. Individuals need to start saying, well, to me, being British, just something written on my passport that dictates where I can travel to and where I work. And people need to stop being patriotic, because, of course, being proud of what you are is more enlightened than being ashamed of what you are. But the ultimate level of enlightenment here is having no identity at all. And that would have a big effect on the control of the corrupt keyholes of society. Things like identity politics will stop working. And that's really what I want to put forward here. So anyway, I'm going to close this post, and thanks for listening to me. And in closing, I'm going to repeat my favourite philosophy, as I always do. A person's beliefs and a person's nature go hand in hand, as do a person's nature and their will. But most importantly, the beliefs, nature and will of the collective generate the very reality in which we all live. Only correct beliefs can set us free. With that, I'm going to say goodbye. God bless.